Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Sal Catalano. I just give you a little bit of background. Just hang on one second. Okay, so I am based in Fort Lauderdale. I have, well, I'll just say 15 plus experience years in software implementation. I worked with Blackbaud for 12 years, and the last 2 years or 3 years, I've been working with NPACT. And really, I'm financial edge expert. Prior to joining Blackbaud, I was in the accounting department of a few nonprofits, worked my way up through from accounts payable all the way through CFO. And that's how I got introduced to Blackbaud. I love the product. I'm a big fan of it, as you'll see. I don't know many of you, which is really nice. So now you know who I am. But I've got experience in various verticals in the nonprofit field. I've led over 500 conversions and implementations. And my new gig, if you will, is consulting and helping clients out with financial edge. What I've noticed over the years there are people who might have had the software for a long time, and maybe they didn't get properly trained, and they're just doing their job because they have to, or doing the minimal, but not really take advantage of what all the features that are available. I'm a CPA, so that sets me apart from other people that might just be software implementers, where I know the accounting part, and that's the part I think that sets me apart from the rest of them, because I do know where to put the debits and credits, and I understand that part of it. I can also explain it. I know that somebody raised a question about how to handle restrictions, and that's always been an issue for years and years, of how to handle restrictions and how to release restrictions. And so I started this series where, I want to give people an opportunity, number one, to meet me and meet our company, because it's not just Financial Edge. We also do consulting with Razor's Edge, and we have some products like Grants Edge and Endowment Manager, things that Financial Edge wouldn't be able to handle. We can handle it for you, okay? And I always just like to say my fun fact of, being able to make pizza and stromboli better than anyone here outside of Sicily. I love to cook. That's one of my passions. And so, and if you ever want to come down to Fort Lauderdale and meet me for lunch or coffee, I would be definitely open for that. Or if you want to do it at the beach, we can do that too. Okay. All right. So the way that this format's going to go is, I want to keep it open with questions, so that I want to give you the opportunity to ask things specific to you and your organization. What I'd like for you to do is just, first of all, is one of the things that I've learned in the past in working with all of these clients is that we're all alone. And when I was in your field, there weren't many opportunities for me to discuss or have conversations with people that were in my field. And so one of the things that I always would tell people is join those groups that Blackbaud has, whether it's just questions that people ask, or just becoming friendly with someone who's another CFO of another organization. Do that, because that really does help you. And again, I know from experience that was the one thing that I lacked. And if I ever called Blackbaud to help me with something that was a little bit beyond the software, I would just get someone that would just say, I'm sorry, you'll have to talk to your accountant. So keep that in mind. And I'd like to use this as well. So in your chat, if you feel comfortable, go ahead and just write your name or what state you're from and the position that you're in, so that other people can share if you feel comfortable doing that, or even your email address, so that people can talk to you. And if you have questions, you can do that. And certainly I'm available. I'll show you when we get to the end of the slide where my email address is. If you need to contact me, I'd be glad to do that. Okay. All right. So having said that, I'm going to just, these are the top 10 issues that I've noticed over the years that have always just been a big issue for clients. And the top one is reconciling AP or AR to your GL. And I am going to show that first today, and then I'll open it up to questions. But the next thing was something that was personal to me, was spending too much time creating financial reports. And, I make a joke that the one bad thing about Financial Edge is that I didn't use Excel anymore. And so all my Excel skills were gone. And so, but the reason being is that all of the reports that I needed were, we have the ability in Financial Edge to create them in there, in the system. So you're not scrambling at the end of a, period or contract.
He was saying to us, FE.
I'm sorry? Oh, sorry. Okay. excuse me. I don't know if that was a question or if that was just background, but um, that, having the financial reports ready. I worked for an organization that had 99% government funding, and so at the end of each month, there was always some contract that was due that I had to do a report for. So I spent a lot of time dumping data from the general ledger into Excel, massaging it, and not and then reporting on it. And of course, as you all know, there could be risk there if there's a mistake on a formula or something like that, or changes. It's just so easy for that to happen. And so one of the things that I always find when I'm working with clients that have had Financial Edge for a while is that they're not using the reports to their full potential. And one of the things is, like, for example, your 990. If you file a 990 report, you're probably, if you don't have a report already in Financial Edge, you're doing that. You're taking data out of your general ledger, you're creating it in Excel, you're massaging it, and then you're typing it into the report that you have to file. Well, we can create that report for you in Financial Edge with all the correct accounts going to the appropriate boxes. And then from there, when it's time to report, all you have to do is just you hit print, and then you can take those numbers and feel confident that those numbers are correct for reporting. Okay. Next biggest thing was bank reconciliations. I can't tell you how many of those that people have done outside the system. And I have seen it all over the years with people just footing numbers that weren't really appropriate. And so I would ask people, well, what's this number? They're like, well, it's a number that I use to balance. And well, that's not right. You're not supposed to be doing that. Your bank reconciliations are supposed to balance. And if there are things that aren't in balance, you need to be able to explain them, not just foot them and just hide them somewhere. So that was the big deal. And I know that, for example, if some of you don't have the bank reconciliations and you're not doing them, and maybe they're all messed up because you've got a lot of years of history in there, it's easy to do. And that's one of the things that I can help you with, so that you can do it in Financial Edge and feel confident that those numbers are correct. Okay, I mentioned grants already. The reporting on is not set up correctly. I mentioned earlier about how the amount of grants that I had, and if you have any grants, you know that, for example, that some grants don't support certain things, and if you have a large accounting department, it might be a little bit more difficult for you to control what's going to each one of these grants. And so what happens at the end of the grant period, you run your reports only to find out that now that there are items that weren't supposed to be there. And so now you're doing reclassification entries, and you're wasting time that should have been done already. If we had set up that grant properly by using the project field and using restrictions, if you will, where certain accounts aren't allowed to be used in certain grants. Those are the things that we want in place, so that, again, when it's time for you to report, all you have to do is press a button and boom, all your reports come out. Okay. Budgeting, I'm sure that's the other thing that was always in Excel. I think people like to have budgets in Excel because it helps them manage them through their program directors, so that they can give access to them and maybe share that information, so that the CFO needs that information from the program directors. Having input from them really gives them that opportunity to just be more responsible for it. And so having them in Excel and setting up these reports and utilizing view-only licenses are key to really getting that data out. So now you're not spending all day answering questions from your program directors as, where am I at in this grant? Where am I at? How much do I need to spend? What are the issues? All these things are things that they can answer themselves by just logging into the system, having a view only, and you can feel confident that they're not going to change anything, because we've set up those security controls where that's all they can see. And we can even limit the amount of programs that they see. So if they're only managing 5 of the 100 programs that you're running, we don't have to give them access to the 100. We can just give them access to the 5 that they need. Okay. Same thing with like certain accounts. I worked for a CEO that didn't want to share the salary accounts. And so you could block them. You could block certain accounts so that if people do run reports, they don't see anything that's related to salary or anything else that you feel like it shouldn't be shared. Okay. Allocations and distributions are a little less common, but it works more for those people who do have grants, or you have endowments. And if you're using allocations in Financial Edge, it works pretty well for for that basic function, but there are some things that Financial Edge cannot do. And if you're doing that in Excel, this might be something that we can do. At Impact, we have a product called Endowment Manager that allows you to do spending policy, allocations, rebalancing, all of those things pretty easily. Okay. I always laugh about this one. The next one, number 8, which is the RE and FE is not integrated. If you have Razor's Edge and Financial Edge and it's not integrated, the first question I ask is, do y'all integrate? Does your finance department speak with your Razor's Edge development department? And I can't tell you how many times the answer is no. And that's a different topic. And we could talk about coaching for that on another day. But if you have both Razor's Edge and Financial Edge, they need to be integrated. And so if you're not using that functionality, then you're doing double work, and that just wastes money. So again, this is something that a lot of people aren't always aware of, or they're just because they don't get along with the development person, there's just always friction. But we have to stop that. We work for an organization. We're all in the same ship here, and we all want it to succeed. So let's not waste time doing things that are duplicative. Okay. And then the chart of accounts, number 9, was just this is another one where people leave. I mean, there are people who've implemented Financial Edge that have left as soon as I finished implementing it. And so now you've got this person who implemented the software, designed the chart of accounts in a way that's specific to what they thought it was. And now you have inherited it, and now you're stuck with using it the way that it was designed. And there could be some changes that we can make, or there's some things that maybe your organization has grown over the years. There's different needs. All of those things are things that we can help you think about. And if we have to redesign your chart of accounts, we can do that as well. And then, of course, the last one, which is the staff turnover, which is related to the one above it, which is, people leave. And when someone leaves, the worst thing is, they do a function and they do it specific to them. And now all of a sudden they're gone, and someone else comes in and they teach you the 1 or 2 things that they've been doing, but there's so much knowledge that gets lost. And so, for me, what I'm always, every time I implement with anyone, I always ask that question is, listen, if we're not going to be here tomorrow, is someone else going to be able to pick this up? Or do we have to just, close down and try to figure out what's going on here? We don't want that. And we've all been in situations like that. It happens just naturally sometimes. But if we can nip it at the bud in the beginning, like, this is how we're going to do it, and we're not going to do it based on what you specifically want, but we want to do it based on what the general need is, so that everyone gets access to that information. Okay. All right. Give me a thumbs up, somebody, that you heard me. Okay, great. All right. The next thing is, I wanted to start off, I don't know if there are any questions in here already, but I'll start off with the one item that I think is pretty specific in terms of the accounts payable to the general ledger reconciliation, because that is, I think, a lot of people's nightmare, especially when it's audit time. Your auditors want to see your aging report or your open invoice report, and it doesn't match your general ledger AP. That's a big issue. And an auditor will have you do a journal entry to adjust that. And what I say is, let's try to fix this before that happens, and put a procedure in place, that will mitigate some of that risk. Okay, so I'm just gonna escape here, and I'm gonna just go into my Financial Edge. Now, I am going to be working in the database view to show you, because as you know, if you have both, you might still be working in this, or you might still be working in the NXT view. Not all the reports are in FENXT, so that's why I chose to kind of start off in here. Okay. The first thing that I want to say in terms of accounts payable is that if you haven't noticed already, if I go into I'm in the accounts payable module, and I go into the report section, and there's a section here that's called reconciliation reports. And in here, there's something that's called an open invoice report. Okay. But what I want to show you here is this, that if I go ahead and just open this report, okay, and I preview it, and I set the dates for March 31st. I just want to show you, and I'll make this larger so you can see it, is that, this down, just minimize this. Hang on. All right, here we go. is that, for example, this report that has an open invoice report as of March 31st has a $13,000 balance. Okay. Now, if I close this and just show you that there's another report under, if I go back to reports and I go into invoice reports, there's an aged, and then there's another open invoice report. I will show you this one first, the aged. Okay. Excuse me. And what before I even preview the report, I just want you to notice that there are so many dates here, right? We've got the date of the report, whether it's calculate the aging. What date do you want? Do you want it based on transaction date, post date, due date? As you might be aware, there are many dates in the financial ledge. And for me, the most important one that to me, is critical to me would be the post date, right? Because that's the part, that's a date that hits your financial statements. So that one's going to be more critical. But some of these reports that we're running here, especially this aged one, it's going to be based on the due date of an invoice. And it's also going to take into account credit memos. So if I go ahead and you notice on that other report where we just previewed, I think the balance was like 13,000. But if I preview this and I haven't done anything in the filters and I just show you this report, you'll see that, and I'm just going to go to the last page and come back one and then make it larger here. You can see here now, I've got a balance of 82,000 here versus that 13 that we just saw a few moments ago. Okay, so if you've ever done this, it's one of those things where you just like, what do you mean? Like, I don't understand how these values can be so off. And this one's 82,000. And then if I run a different one right here, the open invoice report, this is going to give me another value. And again, look at the parameter, look at all these different options that I have. And this is what causes those differences. And so I'll just show you this before I move on. This one, I believe, has a balance. I'll go back a page of 84,000. Okay, so we've got all these different numbers and different reports, and it just makes you wonder, like, well, what am I doing wrong? And then if I run the general ledger detail for the AP account, which I'll show you in a moment, that number is going to be different as well. Okay, so what do we do? I always, whenever someone engages me to kind of try to figure this out, the first thing I try to look in the general ledger is, are there any adjustments or any journal entries that have been done to the accounts payable account? And if there are, why were they? Was it because of an audit adjustment, or was it because someone's just accidentally putting data in there and not realizing, or are you just making journal entries? There is a way for you to lock that account down so that nobody can do any journal entries to that account. And you can toggle between those two so that if you did have to make a journal entry, you could turn off the business rule and make the adjustment and then turn the business rule back on. And that is definitely something that I recommend moving forward, because we don't want that to be an issue. I want to go here just to the general ledger report that I created, just to show you that if I just ran for this period again, I mean, it's not off by much compared to one of those, but however, there's still a difference. And in your organization, if you've had AP a long time, and I notice it happens a lot more with people who have lots of credits, that just really throws off that balance. But you'll see here, and I didn't put all the detail here, but if you can see it here, I'll move this around, 89,000, okay? So we're not too close from two of the reports, but still the number is off. And so it requires us to reconcile it. And so when the number is this close, I don't think your auditors are going to give you a problem, depending on what your materiality rate is, or that might be it might not be a concern. But if it's something, if you run these reports and these numbers are a lot larger, then we need to figure this out. Like, what is it? What's causing this problem? And sometimes I've worked with organizations that have had all this history for a long time, and you could spend days trying to figure this out, going back years to figure out where it went wrong or when it was last in balance, and then move forward to the most current time. Or if it's possible, what I always recommend is there a way for us to just pay all the invoices that are out there, get it to a point where there are 0 invoices. There's no more accounts payable in your system. at that point, if it's possible for you to do that, including credits, or maybe if there's a few credits, you can kind of think about how those would, you'd have to reconcile those at the end. But really, what we want to get to the point is, if you can't figure it out easily by going through the general ledger and not noticing that there are no adjustments, and really just paying attention to the due dates of the invoices, all of those things play a role in you figuring out what the difference is. But if it's still something that you cannot do, then the last step that I've done with multiple organizations is, can we just pay all these things to a point at the end of the month, pay everything off, so that at the end of a given month on April 30th, the balance now is zero, or at least it should be zero. If there are no AP invoices available to pay, your AP account needs to be zero. If it isn't zero at that point, then this is where we make that adjustment, because there's obviously a problem here, and we could spend days trying to find it, or we can just fix it, because really technically that's what it needs to be. And of course, if that amount is huge, I'd always recommend talk about it with your auditor, and get their buy-in as well to see if this makes sense, because you don't want to just make a large adjustment that you'll have to explain during audit. But at least just say, okay, well, this is where it needs to be, because I've already paid all my accounts payable and I don't have anything else to show for that. Okay, so that is I think the easy way out, if you can do that, if it's not if it's not a big number, and you don't have the time to go searching for that difference. That's the way I would do it. And then what I would do after that is for the first few weeks, or even the first few months, every time you enter a batch, when you're accounts payable person, or whoever does that, when you enter invoices and you enter a batch of invoices and you post them, what I would recommend is, just for a short time, go ahead and just run that AP report, run the general ledger, and run the open invoice, and make sure it matches, and start getting to know the system when it doesn't match. Is it a due date issue? Is it because technically, if you enter an invoice today and it's not due until May 1, it's not going to show as an aged receivable, because it's not aged yet, right? It's payable, excuse me. It's not aged yet. So those are the times that you have to think, okay, you know what? I want to get to know how this AP works. And that's the best way to get to know it. So now, even as credits get entered, you keep doing that on a weekly basis, running your GL AP, and you run your open invoice, and you keep trying to match it. And then as you get to know more about it, you'll start to see the patterns of where the differences come in, and then you'll be better at it, just going forward. And of course, if you do it monthly, you'll never have to worry about it on a at the end of the year, when you're being audited, and the auditors are breathing down your neck, because they want all this other stuff. But this is one of those things that we can mitigate and get going sooner. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna just stop right here, pause right here, and I'm gonna just open it up to a question. If you have a question, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask me the question, and we'll go over that. I don't know if there's any questions here in the chat.
I'm monitoring the chat for you, Sal. I don't see any questions coming in. I'll unmute. We did get a question about sharing the PowerPoint after, and we will do that. This is also being recorded. Okay, we do have a question from Faith. She has open invoices in 2018. What should she do with them?
Okay, so the first question I would ask is, is it something that you're just not going to pay? Because it was an invoice that was entered, a while ago, 4 years ago now, right? Yes. So yes, I would find out that, okay, so this is one of those things where it's a prior year adjustment. So you do want to be careful. You don't want to just go ahead and delete it. But the real question is that, do you still owe the money? If you owe the money, was it something that you paid and they just never cashed a check? Or is it just that you never paid it? Figure out why it hasn't been paid. And then if we can delete that invoice, and again, materiality plays a role. If it's a small amount, then you don't have to worry about it. But if it's something that's a large amount, that is something that you'll have to do. But in that case, when it's 4 years ago, and depending on the amount, I would probably look to delete it, put it on a list for your auditors to just go over with them and just say, hey, we've got these invoices since 18, we haven't paid it. I mean, we want to figure out why you didn't pay it. They'll want to know why. Did the company close down, or what happened? Like, why didn't you pay it, and why can't you pay it now? Would be the two questions I would try to answer first. And depending on those answers, I would say, either pay it at that point, or let's just go ahead and delete it. And then deleting it will it'll credit that expense account, so you will have fewer expenses this year because of that amount. And again, depending on how big that amount is, it might play a role in your audit. So for something like that, I would question my auditor, because I would just say, hey, this is, if it's a large amount, of course. If it's a large amount, then that would be something that is going to make a difference to your auditor. So you want them to know about it. Okay. Does that answer your question, Faith?
She believes they were paid. Thank you.
Okay, yes. Okay, so if they were paid, then there's probably maybe a duplicate invoice. Maybe there was another invoice already in there, but it might be just then. If that's the case, that's great. That's even easier, because then all you have to do, I'll just, in terms of how to do that, I will just go to my accounts payable, and you know what? I'm going to go to invoices. And if you've never, I'm going to just pick an old invoice here. I've got one from 15. And now you will have to check a couple of things here. Notice here, now this is we're in the database view, and right here, as I open this invoice is actually not paid yet. I'm sorry, not posted yet. And it's also, but it's been paid, right? You can see that it's been paid, but it hasn't been posted. The actual invoice, that means the debit to the expense account right here to office supplies and credit to AP hasn't actually been posted. Okay, so we would need to find out if that particular invoice has been posted, and then if it has been paid, what you would need to do first is you would have to void the payment. But I don't think, Faith, in this example that's the case, because it might just be something that's still outstanding, and maybe the status still says approved, probably. And if that's the case, all you have to do, whether it's not yet posted or posted, it doesn't really matter. You can just delete it. And if it's not yet posted, it will just disappear. And if it is posted and you hit delete, it will create the reversing entry for you. Okay, so you don't have to worry about that, because you'll notice that when you go ahead and post it at the end of the day or at the end of this transaction, you'll see that there's a reversal for this particular invoice. Okay, and like I said, and if it was paid, well, that's not the case. For those of you who have those situations, well, maybe the check has not been outstanding, which is another issue that comes up all the time. We have some of these checks that people write to organizations, and nobody cashes them, and for years, and there's got to be a point where you have to decide that I'm going to delete that invoice or that check. These people are never going to cash it. So either I'm going to send them a new check, call them and try to say, okay, this check's never been cleared. Would you like another check? Or you just decide, since it's long ago, that I'm just going to void that check and then delete the invoice. And that's another part of the cleanup. I see a lot more of where people have years worth of checks that haven't been cashed. I don't know what, you might want to ask your auditor what would be a standard for you. But for me, like, if a check is outstanding more than a year, and I've tried at least 2 times to reach out to them to say to them, hey, you haven't cashed my check. What's the problem? Have that documented, because that's what auditors want to see, is that you've tried, you've communicated, you've sent out emails, or you've made phone calls. And if you can't get in touch with them and that check is still outstanding, then by all means, void the check. And then you can come in here the same way that I'm just showing you right here. You can go to that invoice and just hit delete, and it'll create the reversing entries. And so will the voiding of the payment. When you void the payment, that will also create that reversing entry that will credit cash and debit, in this case, accounts payable, I believe. Yes, accounts payable. Okay. All right. What's next? Any other questions?
So I'm looking at the chat here for you if anything comes in.
All right.
We did have some questions submitted prior to.
Yep, we'll go over one of those then. That's great. So the next thing that I want to show you that I think is critical. I mentioned earlier about the 990. So I want to show you, because this is something that this doesn't just help you with your 990, but think about any kind of report that you do that is for like a state agency or the federal government, anybody, a foundation. More than likely, when they give you money, they want it reported back to them in a certain format. And so I take the 990 as an example, but I don't want you to think that I'm limiting this conversation to 990s. Although just having a 990 report would help me, because I think that's where a lot of my stress used to be, is having to prepare that every year. But with Financial Edge, there's this the concept of the visual chart organizer. Okay, this is, if you picture a financial statement, which I'll get to in a minute. It's not loading here. If if you can picture a financial statement, the left-hand side of the financial statement is the chart. Okay, that's where all the numbers get categorized. So if you have, and I'll show you in a minute with the 990, is that like there'll be a box that says report your revenues for the year, or less something else. Maybe there's some, like, an example would be cost of goods sold, but something like that, where you have to, maybe there's some money that you spent getting that money, but you want to show it as a net. And all these things are things that you would do in your general ledger. But however, if you create this visual chart for that specific grant, or for the 990, or whomever, what'll happen is, and I'll just show you, I created one that I just called the 990, but I'll show you here. I'll make this larger. You can see here that what I've done is I looked at the 990, and I looked at, line number 8 on the 990 is called contributions and grants. So you can type that in so that it looks like that. And then right underneath that, I can go ahead and show you here that here is where what account codes are associated with that particular line. Okay, and we're not limited to just account codes. We can also just do, like, we could do it by advanced filtering. So if you have a department segment, or if you want to do it by project, or I don't know, whatever is excuse me, whatever is specific to your organization, we can accommodate that. And so if you take the time to do this, and it's really not a lot of time, because if you do it every year for some of these grants and reports, and so if you make the investment in the beginning by creating this chart right here, and notice I've copied the exact same lines that I need for the 990, line 9, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then I've got the expenses, I've got the amounts that they're looking for. All of these are the same categories that are on the financial statement. Okay, and now when I'm going to just close this to show you, if I go, and I'm going to do this in the NXT view, just to show you, because I've got it here. In my reports, okay, here's the report that I have. And now, once that chart is already created, I can change the dates. Now, this is for 2021. If I wanted to change it for 2022, I can do that by just coming in here and changing the dates that I want. Okay, if you're not familiar with this, I can show you how to do that, but you would change the dates if there were any additional filters. So if you have, some organizations might have multiple orgs within their Financial Edge database, this would be your opportunity to limit that information. All these things are available. I mean, if you're familiar with these reports, these are awesome. This is kind of like what I said about earlier. If you're using Excel to do your reports and you're not utilizing this, you're missing out. Because I can almost guarantee you that all of the reports that you need are in Financial Edge. I mean, there might be some organizations that might have something very specific. I get it. There's definitely opportunities for that, but there might be something for you to do in Financial Edge. But the real thing here is to have them all in here so that we know that they work. The data is in real time, and when anybody wants to log in, like again, I mentioned earlier about the view-only licenses, this would be where they could access that information, okay? And if I just go ahead and just run, you can see that's working here on the bottom right-hand corner. At the end of the period, when this financial statement is due, all I have to do is run this report, and I'll make it larger. And now you can see that all the numbers that I've put in from that chart organizer, see how we saw that on this left-hand side? And now you've got all the numbers that really flow into these categories. Okay, so now when this form is due, you know, you're supposed to fill out the finance part of it. Here it is. Here it is. You just take these numbers, type them in, or I don't know if they can do them electronically these days, but that would be, you know, here are the numbers, and you can feel confident that they're there. And then you could run a general ledger report to support these numbers and have that be part of the whole packet. And so that if anyone has any questions, no one is wondering where you are, what you did, or even you, because I know for me, I do things and I always forget. So this would be my way to do it. My backup is all included, and it's all there for everybody to see. Okay. Any questions on this? And don't forget, you'll unmute yourself if you want to ask.
Awesome, Sal. I don't see anything coming in through the chat. It's 11:38.
All right.
You know, I think we could transition and move through your PowerPoint.
Okay. Let me do this. Okay. So, all right. So questions. If there are any, that's okay. And if some of you are shy, I always, you know, most accountants, we're all shy people. So if you think of anything that you want to ask, like here's my email address, please, feel free to email me. I believe that if you click on the link here where it says request consulting, you can click the link, and there's also a calendar invite there where you could see my schedule, and you'd be able to book either 30 minutes or an hour just to kind of discuss some issues that you might have or some questions that you might have. I'd be glad to help, or at least help you through thinking about it if that's something that you want to do. Remember that it's not just Financial Edge. I know that we've got a lot of finance folks here, but it might come up where there's also questions about your Razor's Edge, anything like that. Like, we can help you with that. We also have a really awesome team in the background that does conversions and things like that. So anything that's related to data, manipulation of data, we can certainly talk to you about how we could help you manage all of that. Okay. So and I'll just continue here. I'll come back to this slide in a minute. You know what? I'll just come back to it. Just so that you can copy this information. But again, this is the first day of this series. I'm really excited about it. I love to help people, and I haven't worked with a lot of you. I don't remember a lot of the names here, but if we work together, you'll see that there's a lot of stuff that we can do to make your life easier, and that's always my goal. Like, I love Financial Edge. I come from the experience of using it and implementing it and working with so many clients in the industry over many industries, and so there's a lot of knowledge in my head. And so if you want to access some of that knowledge, I am here. I'm available, and we're going to be doing these series through the end of June. If you know anyone that might be interested or has Financial Edge, again, like, this is where I think that connections, making, networking with people is going to help you. Just to have a friend, someone that you can ask a question about Financial Edge, or someone else, things like that. So, utilize that, because it will make your life easier having a network of people that you can talk with. And so we'll be here every other week at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And again, if you want to forward our link, or maybe just send us the email of the people that you want us to invite, maybe even your accounts payable person or someone on your team, you just want them to participate and just listen to some ideas that come up, then, you know, I welcome that. I would love that and appreciate it. Okay.
Sal, we did have one more question come in about what account code do you use for those 990 form accounts?
Oh, okay. So for those, it really just depends on your chart of accounts. So in this particular database that I was looking at here, it's our sample database, and I think we just had some of the revenue accounts in there. But really, you know, what I would do if I were you is, you know, look at the, you know, when you filed it last year, what numbers did you use? You know, are you able to track it back so that you can figure out what those account numbers are? And it might not be account codes. It might be something that's department related. So what you want to do is figure out, like, where did you get the numbers last year? Or if you're starting fresh, then we need to figure out, like, okay, well, what are we looking for? Are they just looking for contributions and grants? And then we can look at your chart of accounts to determine which of those belong in each one of those categories. So it's going to take a little bit of investigating for you to do that, but I do think that if you're familiar with the chart, and of course, there's also classes at Blackbaud that, you know, offer you training on how to do a chart organizer and things like that, and a lot of you probably have like training passes that, you know, I'm sure you don't use because we don't have enough time to do our own jobs, but you know, utilize those to get them. You know, that's always a great way, and I always think that really expands your knowledge in those classes. You know, and it also helps you talk to someone like me. You know, like when I implement someone, it's always easier for me to talk with someone who's familiar with the chart of accounts, but also has that accounting knowledge. And that's where I come in, where, you know, you can go to Blackbaud and they'll show you what buttons to click just to show you what things to do and how to do this, which is awesome. But sometimes we, or accountants, we have questions about that are a little bit beyond the software that are accounting related. And that's where I come in. That's where I can help you think through that. If you've got stuff that is higher level, if you will, that, you know, let's say you're about to start a capital campaign and you're worried because you're going to get a lot of money starting this campaign, or you're applying for a lot of grants, or even, you know, 2 years ago, when the PPP loans came out, that was one of the biggest issues. Everybody was so worried about how to report on them. Everybody wanted the money, but they didn't want to be penalized in the end. And so this is where those chart organizers come in handy. When you find out you're getting new funding or you're expecting new funding, let's set that up in advance so that you're ready when those reports are due. Okay. I'm not sure if that answered that question with the 990, but the point is that it depends on your chart of account, really, is where the answers lie. Okay. Any other questions?
The chat is clear, Sal. You're good to go.
All right. Well, then I guess thank you everybody for joining. I hope I see you again on April 27th, I guess is our next day. Yes. I'm very excited about this, so I hope you are too. You know, at least to give you an hour to do something different. So I hope to see you again and some additional people. And that's all I got. So thank you, everybody. And we'll send out the link to this. So if you do want to share it with somebody, you can go ahead and do that.
Awesome job, Sal. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.